Good morning. Call to order this meeting of the Planning Commission. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Cowley.
Here.
Commissioner Onstadt.
Here.
Commissioner Dukas.
Here.
Commissioner Kessley.
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Here.
Now is time set aside for comments by citizens on matters not appearing on the agenda. Are there any comments, public comments? Seeing none, let's look at the approval of the May 5th, 2016 minutes. Someone needs to move approval of the May 5th, 2016 minutes.
I move approval.
I'll move for approval of the minutes on the
I'll
May
second.
25th.
Okay, doke. Okay, now is item 6 on our agenda, PL 14-0128, Verizon Wireless. Good morning.
Good morning. So I have a little bit of a cold, so excuse me for that. Waiting for the prompt for the. So good morning, Commissioners. Christina Boero, for the record. I'm of planning staff. Before I start my presentation today, I'd like to turn your attention to two additional items that we received, that you received after your Planning Commission packet was sent to you. The first one is Exhibit 9. It's an errata memorandum. It's a correction to the mitigated negative declaration that was prepared for the proposed project, and that's Exhibit 4 of your Planning Commission packet. And basically the correction is on pages 6 and 22 of the MND, and it notes the actual dimensions of the concrete pad that is proposed to be included with this wireless facility. And the correction is that it's actually a 7-foot by 7-foot concrete pad. We also received a letter from Verizon Wireless, who's the applicant, and it's from their RF engineer, Mr. Bonham, and he's here today to answer any questions you might have. But it's just basically a letter stating the justification and the reason for the location of the facility. Next, Exhibit A of your Planning Commission packet. So the project site is located basically adjacent to the Santa Barbara County line in the Rincon Point area of Ventura County. And the main access road is Bates Road. And it's adjacent also to the US 101 and the Southern Pacific Railroad line, and the Pacific Ocean is south of the site. And the blue star here is basically where the site is located. It's on a 10-acre lot, and it's basically for agricultural production on the site. Cherimoya and lemon trees, and there's a existing single-family dwelling and some accessory structures. And the existing single-family dwelling on the lot is about 1,000 feet from the project site of the wireless facility. So the project site has a general plan designation of open space, a coastal area plan designation of agriculture, and a zoning designation of coastal agriculture, 40 acres, minimum lot size. To get a feel of the surrounding area, the site is predominantly surrounded by open space and ag uses. And there's a residential development, Rincon Point, and that's about 713 feet south of the proposed lease area. So to get a feel of what the site looks like now, to the left, you see a picture of the existing site, and this picture was taken from the Rincon Point Recreation Area parking lot, and the facility would be located behind these existing palm trees. And we're looking towards Ventura. And in this picture, we're looking south on the project site when you see the trees in the background. So what's before you today is a proposed conditional use permit application, a CUP application, for a wireless facility, and it's to construct, operate, and maintain that facility. It's going to be proposed as a 45-foot mono palm tree, a stealth design, and it has a 186 square foot equipment area. And the total lease area for the site is 1,225 square feet. There will be 6 panel antennas proposed. There will be 3 at the 38-foot level of the tree and 3 at the 28-foot level of the tree. There will be 2 GPS units attached to the equipment area and an emergency generator. To orientate yourself with the site, to the left of the screen, we have the access road in brown. And then we have the lease area also, I guess it's a brown color as well. And then here's the existing palm trees along the road and along the cliff of the proposed lot. So the proposed lease area would be 20 feet from the property line. This is the property line, and 47 feet from the trees. So this is the equipment plan. The yellow color structures are all the equipment and facilities located in the proposed lease area, and the green is the tree. And then this is just the equipment plan showing the layout of the equipment on 3 sectors. So we have a south elevation. We have the proposed 45-foot mono palm tree with the existing trees in the background. So these existing trees range in size from 17 feet to 27 feet in height. So basically, most of the site will be screened from view. And then this is the north elevation. So environmental review. Planning staff prepared a mitigated negative declaration for the project, and we had a public review period from April 1st to May 2nd of this year. The mitigation measures that resulted from the project were 4 of them. There's 3 biological resource mitigation measures and 4 cultural resource mitigation measures. The monarch, and these are the condition numbers associated with the mitigation, and that's in Exhibit 5 of your staff report. So the monarch butterfly winter roost sites and the pre-construction nesting bird surveys, basically those 2 mitigation measures prohibit development or construction of the site within certain periods of time. But if the site was to be developed within those prohibited time frames, then a qualified biologist that's qualified by the county would have to conduct surveys to figure out where these sites are and then provide mitigation in areas where they can buffer the sites from the butterflies and the nesting birds. The fuel modification plan, the Ventura County Fire Department requires a fuel modification, so that means there's brush clearing within 30 feet of the structure of the facility lease area. And so because there's a coastal sage scrub on the project site and different areas around the site, this is considered environmentally sensitive habitat area under the coastal area plan. So it's a protected kind of vegetation. So this mitigation measure requires the applicant to basically revegetate the site with native drought-tolerant plants and such, so that it can minimize the impacts of that of the fuel modification, the vegetation removal from the site. And the cultural resources mitigation measure. When the main dwelling on the site was constructed in 2011, there was a archaeological evaluation done on the site, and that study found that there was actually a cultural resource area on the site. So they basically required the applicant or the property owner at that time to temporarily fence the site during the construction. So that mitigation measure is carried over into this project, and basically we're going to require the applicant to fence a certain area of the site with temporary fencing during construction. And that area, the general location of that area, is located is shown in Exhibit, I believe it's 6 of your Planning Commission packet. So, justification for the proposed facility. All discretionary wireless communication facility applications in the county, we do require photo simulations of the site to see what it's going to look like. So, on the left, we have what the site looks like now. And then on the right is what the facility would most probably look like. You have the tree and some of the equipment and some of the 6-inch chain link fence with it's going to be covered green slats to reduce the impacts.
Do you mean 6 foot?
Excuse me?
Do you mean 6 foot?
6 foot.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is just another photo simulation taken from the same vantage point from a previous photo that I showed you. It's from the Rincon Point Recreation Area. So you have what it looks like now, and then this is what it would look like with the installation of the facility. So what impacts does the project site and the monopalm have on public views? So here's sorry for the small picture, but we wanted to capture the whole area. So the black circle with the X through it is the project site, and the red dots are the areas where there's potential visibility for the site. So basically, you would see the site from you may see the site from portions of Highway 101. And here's the Rincon Point area, the residential development. And so I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but the site is located on a cliff, and it's the height from the top of the cliff to the bottom is about 100 feet. So it's 100 feet above the site. So we did public notification for the MND and for the public hearing. They were the same notification to the same people, but on 2 different occasions. We contacted and put a notice in the Ventura County Star, property owners within 300 feet and residents within 100 feet. And we also contacted all of the 38 residents within the Rincon Point area, that residential development. As a courtesy during the first 30 days of review, we do send out a project description to the property owners associations in the area that have contacted us wanting to be notified, and other state and local jurisdictions. And the property owner did, the HOA did, and some other residents did provide comments, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But during the M&D period, we did receive 1 public comment, and that was on adverse public health concerns for the installation of the facility. And we also received about 16 public comments, and basically they were in 2 areas. They were in the adverse health impacts on the public, and also the concerns regarding the location of the facility and the need for the facility. So in regards to public health, Section 704A of the Federal Telecommunications Act basically prohibits local jurisdictions from discriminating among providers and also for services. And basically that also includes radio frequency emissions. But to give us some justification as to whether the facility was within the FCC standards, we did receive a radio frequency emissions report by the RF engineer, and that is located in, I believe it's Exhibit 7 of your Planning Commission packet. And basically the statement says that it does comply, the site will comply with FCC standards with regards to the goal of minimizing the RF effects on the public in the surrounding area.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Who prepared the report again?
Let me get my...
Was it county sponsored or applicant sponsored?
The applicant submitted it with their application packet, Mr.
And
Ronstadt.
what do we do to verify, if anything, the report?
Chair Dukas, Commissioner Onstott, I will give it over to planning managers.
Chair Idukas, Commissioner Onstott, we don't have a radio frequency engineer on staff, and we don't verify those things. We do that so we have a licensed engineer attesting that it meets standards, but the FCC won't permit it if it doesn't meet standards. So it's a double check for us that we have some verification that it will meet the radio frequency emission standards.
So the regulatory agency reviews it too? And I assume they have the expertise to do that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Matter of fact, that's where most of the radio frequency engineers are, over the FCC.
Thank you.
So in regards to public concern for siting, the applicant did submit and is required to submit coverage maps. So it has the existing coverage. The red is usually the bad coverage areas, and the green is the good coverage areas. So with the proposed facility, the goal of improving coverage on Highway 101 would be achieved with the installation of the facility.
Excuse me, ma'am. For us colorblind folks, could you go back to that?
Yes.
Where, basically,
So
we're improving coverage in what areas?
basically in the Highway 101 corridor.
Are you talking about the point there and the housing down the coast?
I believe that would be included in the coverage area. And coverage would improve north of the facility, northwest of the facility, more adjacent to the Santa Barbara County line.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Commissioner Onstott, as you can clearly see, sorry, I'm
That's
losing
all right.
it. I'm getting close. The coverage that the place where I drive through here every morning, by the way. I live in Santa Barbara County, and the place where the coverage drops is right at the county line. And there's a point and a hillside right there where you go around the corner and you lose coverage right there.
Right.
So this facility basically covering that area right at the county line where 101 goes through. And the ancillary beneficiaries will be the Rincon Point community, which will get slightly better. But it's really to cover that turn around the Santa Barbara County line where there's that mountainside.
Okay. Thank you.
So compliance with the non-coastal zoning ordinance and federal law. So recently, the federal government passed a law, which is the Federal Spectrum Act, and there's a section in that act pertaining to wireless facilities, and it's Section 6409, and basically that allows wireless facilities to get a ministerial modification of their permit to increase the height, and usually it's to 20 feet of a 20-foot increase, and that's a ministerial action. So the applicant today has not proposed to do a 6409 modification height increase. And if they were to do that, the county staff believes that it would not reasonably be foreseeable that that would be granted. And basically it's because of the facility design. The facility is proposed at 45 feet in height, and the existing trees along the edge of the cliff are between 17 and 27 feet in height. So if the facility was to be increased another 20 feet, then the concealment element of the facility would be defeated because they'd be more visible to the public. And it would also be incompatible, basically, for that same reason. So staff today, here's the recommended actions. I'm not going to read them to you, but they're in your Planning Commission packet. So that concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. And we also have the applicant and an RF engineer from Verizon Wireless here, and we also have a neighbor from in the area of the project site here as well.
Thank you very much. Before we move on, now is the time for disclosures by commissioners. At this time, I would like to ask each planning commissioner to state on the record whether or not he or she has received any oral or written ex parte communication regarding this agenda item that is not already contained in the record before us on this matter. Please disclose the substance of that information only if that information is not contained in the record before us on this matter. Starting to my left, Commissioner Rodriguez, any disclosures?
No disclosure.
No disclosures.
No disclosures.
No disclosures.
And I have no disclosures. So do we have any questions of staff at this time? Yes.
I have one, Christina. With regards to that 20-foot additional height requirement, is that something that is approved by staff if it was presented? Or does it come back to the commission?
Chair Dukas, Commissioner Kesley, that is a ministerial action, and there is an application that is required to be submitted by the carrier, and it's a zoning clearance application. We do take it in or review the application to see if it meets the standards.
And it could be denied based on the concealment aspect?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have.
Go ahead.
My understanding, the zoning sets 35 feet as the height of that false palm tree, and we're giving them 45. And I'm assuming you're saying that they've demonstrated that the facility is the least intrusive, which is why you gave them the extra 10 feet, as it says in the staff report. Are you telling me that if they make an application, we can deny it, but do the feds preempt this thing in any way?
Chair
I know-
Dukas, Commissioner Onstadt, yes. The federal government, our local zoning rules, if they can demonstrate a need for coverage in a facility of that height, that overrides our local ordinances. So in terms of siting and filling a coverage gap and even the height of a facility, the federal law overrides local ordinances. So they've demonstrated a need for a facility at this height and at this location. They've demonstrated a coverage gap, and so under our ordinance, we can't deny it because of a 35-foot height limit in the basic area of the coastal zone. Again, and then there's another question. That's largely for buildings, and this is more of a public utility rather than a building. But you're correct. It is over the height limit for this zone.
I understand that we can also be compelled to allow additional antennas because of federal law allowing them to piggyback on existing antennas. Is that correct, too?
Well, what the federal 6409 exemption allows is non-substantial changes in a facility. Now, it's already been mentioned that if the non-substantial changes defeat the stealth nature of the facility, it can be denied. That's a ministerial act. And of course, what we've included in this staff report is our analysis of that 6409 future decision.
Right.
And we're establishing in the record that today we don't believe that this facility be eligible for a 6409 exemption. A co-location on a palm tree it defeats the purpose of the palm tree because it would have to be below the fronds. It can't be co-located up in the same location. So you couldn't co-locate, and if you go 20 feet higher, it'll be from the public viewpoints substantially higher than the other palm trees. So we've set the wheels in motion as best we can that this is it for this site.
Okay. So we've done all we could do to ensure the fact that what we're permitting will stay the same.
That's correct. And council helped us with working out the language on the 6409. And we believe that we're setting in the record the first thing that would happen if they come in for a ministerial permit and a 6409 application is the first thing we would check is the staff report for when this project was approved, years earlier, and see that language and the discussion and the findings that essentially is being made here today that increases in height would defeat the stealth nature of that. And so that gives us a legal basis to say no at the front counter. But it does not come back to a decision-making body on a discretionary permit.
I'm assuming because of the location of this antenna, we gave it strict scrutiny as to its location. I mean, is there any reason why it couldn't be back further or up the hill?
Well, as indicated by the radio frequency engineer, the further back you go, the higher it has to be, because the antennas have to have a line of sight down to the highway. And remember, we're at the top of a 100-foot cliff.
Right.
So the further back it goes, the higher it has to be to reach the coverage objective of the highway. So, and then of course, the closer to the edge of the cliff it goes, that brings up geotechnical issues, and it also makes it stand out as higher than the palm trees that are there. So right now, at the angle of view from the highway, looking up, in the few spots that you actually could safely view it, the angle is that the top of the palm tree from the highway will look about the same, at the same point view-wise as the palm trees that are at the edge of the hill.
Right, I didn't understand the coverage issues because I know there are antennas further up the hill on the mountain.
There's microwave and very large communication facilities at the top of Rincon Mountain.
Thank you,
That's
sir.
not what this is intended to augment.
I have a question about maintaining the stealth nature of this and maintaining the palm trees that are there or increasing the number of palm trees. Is there some provision in the permit to make sure that there are still palm trees up there? It's a 10-year permit, correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Calley, this is why we have only 10-year permits for cell sites, because in the 10th year we review exactly what is still on the ground at the site. The palm trees have been there a long time. We have no reason to believe that they're going to be taken down. There are reasons to move it that you don't want to move it further north because, number one, you'd be taking out established agricultural fields, which would cause all kinds of other impacts and policy concerns. And again, you wouldn't want to move it close to the edge to make it more visible and sort of defeat the screening ability of the palm trees that are already there. So the site is given the lay of the land and the property that it's on, that's probably the best place to put it. I can tell you that the most view that you'll have of this site is in Santa Barbara County. And so as a resident of Santa Barbara County, I object to this project. But since that's not my role today, I would just tell you that once you get into the county and you get on the highway, and I see this every day, coming south, you have a very limited view of the site, and you have to turn your head 90 degrees to see it while you're on the freeway. Well, that's not a good idea, and very few people are doing that. Coming the other way, you don't see it from distance. You won't see the site from distance because it's behind the line of palm trees, and from geometry you won't see it. And by the time you're close to it, it will be at the top of your windshield, or in the views, it will be the ceiling above you. If you're in a convertible, you'll see this. But that's the limit of public views.
Any other questions? Okay.
Maybe it's a question. There's a picture or a diagram that appears to show like about a 5-mile radius circle around the point of the cell site, which would pretty much include overlapping coverage for Carpinteria. Is that correct? And I don't remember what page it's on. It's on one page, page 139 of the staff report.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Rodriguez, the map you're referring to is it's in the mitigated negative declaration, and it is just a map showing what the existing and foreseeable pending projects are in the county within a 5-mile radius of the project site.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, I will open the public hearing now and hear the presentation of the applicant. I've got 2 cards here, and I don't know which one. Okay, Tricia, you will-
yes.
Okay,
Tricia
he got his
Knight with
card in before you,
Verizon
so you
Wireless.
got to step it up.
I should have said applicant on there. I apologize for that. Staff did an amazing job summarizing the project, very detailed staff report with a lot of information. And so I'm just going to be available for any specific questions that you might have for me. I also have Dwayne Bonham, our RF engineer, that can answer technical questions about that gap, how far it covers, what's it connecting to, and any of those types of questions. But any overall project questions or after the public has spoken, I can answer those questions.
So are you more on the real estate end of it?
I'm not real estate, no, I'm just permitting. And so we have another group of people that deal with the real estate aspect of it. But I can answer general questions. I know a general knowledge, but not detailed.
Okay, I'm just curious as to how this connects with the existing framework that Verizon has.
Within their network itself?
Yeah, is that something to ask the RF
Dwayne will come up and give a little bit more detail, but in general, that gap that the planning director was referring to as he's driving, it's an actual hole, and if anyone's been driving or talking on the phone, it's very clear. It just drops like a stone. And so this is connecting from the existing sites in Ventura around that curve to an existing site in Carpinteria. So it's just connecting the dots. And this has been a hole along, I can't remember a time that I've ever had coverage on that curve. So it's just sort of connecting the dots along that framework.
Are there
I have
other
a
questions?
question,
Go ahead.
Does Verizon accept the mitigation measures that are listed in the staff report?
Yes, absolutely. We worked with staff over many, many months as going through the biological and cultural resources, and yes, those are all acceptable.
Thank you.
I have a comment or question, I guess. It speaks to the fact there's going to be a 30 kilowatt generator on-prem, and there's obviously maintenance on a generator as backup power, correct?
Correct.
There's no mention at all of any schedule for the maintenance on that generator. Is that factored in anywhere? I just, whether it's automated or somebody manually arrives at the site to handle it.
It's automated, and you can set the time. What we typically like to do is leave it up to the commission to decide, like on a Monday. It comes on once a week for 15 minutes. And so just to make sure it's cycling on. And what that's for is in the event of a true emergency, and the power is knocked out, we have backup batteries that last for about 5 to 8 hours. But in the true emergency, this generator is going to kick on so that site does not go down. But it does get tested once a week for 15 minutes, and we can make it like on a Monday at 10 a.m. So that most people are at work, if that's what the commission would like to add a condition.
Yeah, I realize the ambient noise from the roadway and everything pretty well will muffle any sound, but since it's automated, I certainly would prefer to see a daytime testing as opposed to evening testing where people are at home
Absolutely.
trying to enjoy their evening, and there may not be much traffic on the road. And I would assume during the week, some time during the work week, excluding the weekends, I think would be preferable from the residents' perspective in the area.
No problem with that condition at all.
That would be a recommendation I would suggest we incorporate into the CUP. You can work with planning on identifying some hours.
Absolutely.
Where that's okay. Thank you.
No problem.
I guess that's it for now. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'll be right here.
Dwayne Bonham.
Hello, Dwayne Bonham from Verizon Wireless. Just a little bit about the need for it and the reasoning for the height. And I'm available to answer any questions you may have. We have a gap. That's the county line there is where the Northern California portion of Verizon and the Southern California portion of Verizon meet. This has been the border of that since wireless has been in existence, and this is a long-standing hole in the network. About 5 years ago, we decided to start, we met with Southern California and came up with a site here as a plan to fix that, to finally take care of Highway 101. 5 years later, here we are. The reasoning for the height is radio works a lot like light. And if I set a light on the middle of this desk trying to light the floor around it, it's not going to work. Where the highway drives at the base of a cliff, we have a large cliff there. The site's back here, it's 50 foot back, and the highway runs right here, right at the base of the cliff. That creates what we call a shadow in the effect. The lower we go, the greater that shadow. So that's the reasoning. We're asking for the height. And as was mentioned, the further we move it back in order to keep that shadow even where it is, the higher the tower would need to go. If I had my preference as an RF engineer, It would be right on the edge of that cliff, and it'd be very visible. But we tried to make a compromise to build a site that fits in well with the community, serves the need that we have to provide service, and is respectful of the people that live near that area. Is there any questions you guys have?
Any questions at this time? No. I have a couple. This is real estate driven. I mean, if you didn't have a willing landlord, you'd find a way to make it work, right?
We tried for 5 years looking for other things. There's a lot cheaper options for us, such as going on telephone poles. There are no telephone poles there in the area that would work. We went through a number of different, trying to work with the state, trying to work with different entities to try to find a site, and this was all we came up. That's the reason it's been 5 years since we started down this road to the point where we are now, is because it's very difficult in this area. There's a very limited number of options available. And this is, I'll be honest, this is the last hope of ever filling that hole. So.
What other facilities does Verizon have in that general vicinity? Do you have facilities in Faria Beach?
La Conchita and Faria Beach are the two to the south of there for the Southern California network. And then the northern, we're working on building one at near the Bates Road off-ramp. However, that will not get around. The land comes out as a point right there. And when you go around that...
Do you want to bring up the...
Yeah, there's a map.
And show me where the Northern California proposed facility is going, even though that's not going to come before us.
Sorry.
Is this sufficient, or do you need that other one?
No, it would be a far more zoomed out map that we would need. It would be about 1 mile north of there on Highway. I'm guessing about a mile north of there on Highway 101. It's a very low site that we're proposing. Actually, I think we're approved on that site, but it's more to cover the commercial area north of Bates Road. I believe it's Bates Road. In the southern area of Carpinteria.
And that's your entire network in that
and
region?
If you can see where you're going around the point there, actually where the red dots are, you go, as I mentioned, shadowed. You'd go shadowed from that site, actually before even that point, before you get to the Bates Road. I'm sorry, it's not Bates Road. It's the next road north of there. You'd go shadowed from that site at that point.
You're saying that you don't have a proposed facility on Bates Road? I thought that you just said you did.
I did. I said we did. I apologize. Do you remember what the next road north of there is?
It's at the top of the...
I'm sorry. I don't remember what the next off-ramp is north of that point. Is it?
I think it's Casitas Pass Road.
I think it's even north there. It's up Baylord. Sorry. Highway 101 Baylord. That is our next site north of there.
Okay.
So.
And are there any other facilities that you have up on the mountain?
No.
Okay.
No. And we would much prefer, if we had another facility that would do this, we're a business. That'd be way cheaper. We're here to make money. This isn't a project that's going to make us money. It's just going to fill a hole. If there was an easier way to solve this...
That's not something that the Planning Commission concerns itself about. If you make money, God bless you. Can I have some? Anyway, the issue that I'm getting at is this is part of a network of interrelated parts.
Yes.
And one hands off to another. And there are places that are capacity and there's places that are coverage. Could you talk about the what's really happening there when you lose your connection?
Yeah, this is actually a coverage hole. The majority of the sites that we build these days are due to capacity, where there's just too many users for the network, and we need to divide those users onto a different site. In this particular case, this is a purely coverage site. It serves no capacity purpose. There's not a lot of use out there. There's the residents of Rincon Point. I don't even know if they have service these days. If they do, it's very weak. The sole purpose for this is to fill that coverage gap on Highway 101, and as a side note, to provide service to the residents of Rincon Point.
And let me ask you a couple questions about your competitors. What other service providers are there that you're competing with?
There are none in this area that I'm aware of, and we do competitive analysis, and the other carriers also, from what we see, drop in this area.
There are a number of physical facilities at Faria Beach, and I'm wondering what those who are those carriers? How many carriers are in this area?
You know, I'm actually the engineer for Santa Barbara County, so I'm not fully up to speed on everything in Ventura County. I do know, because I've met with our engineer down here when we were looking at how do we fix this issue. And we do have a site there at Faria Beach because of the location it is up the hill and how closely the highway hugs the cliff. That's creating the shadowing effect that we see that causes the drop here. I believe there's several carriers at Faria Beach, but I don't know for sure.
When I'm on my phone and say I have Verizon and another service provider has coverage in the area, can my phone maintain its connection by sharing facilities, sharing the propagation with other carriers?
No, it cannot. It will drop. Sprint will, it's called roam onto another network. However, the calls do not seamlessly hand off to that other network. So when we put this in, if you drive through and you're on a Sprint phone, Sprint will lose their service. They'll come up on our site, and then they'll stay on our site. However, their customers will still drop. Same thing with us. We cannot hand off calls to AT&T. We don't roam on AT&T, and the rest of them don't. They don't have enough service for it to make any sense for us to have any agreements with them. There's no technological way to hand off calls between one carrier and another carrier.
Okay, any other questions?
I have, I guess, a point of clarification. And I guess it's a declaration. I'm a Verizon wireless user. It just occurred to me as we were reading this material. Verizon has sold off its hardline infrastructure, and because they were separate buildings, and now is the company now called Verizon, or is it still called Verizon Wireless? I say that only because I now get billings that just say Verizon, whereas months ago it was said Verizon Wireless. Now I get Frontier and Verizon to cover the wireless.
We're both part of the same parent corporation, Verizon. They're separate sub-corporations of Verizon, the old Verizon Wireless, Verizon Business. The corporation decided to drop the wireless, even though some of us have been there forever, still tend to use that term. Internally, from an external standpoint, they wanted it to look as if it was one company. So yeah, it is Verizon is what it shows now. And yes, we did sell off some portions of the landline or the wireline side of the business. Some of those entities were sold off here on the West Coast.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you very much, sir. Next speaker is Anthony Brown. Good morning.
Good morning. Anthony Brown, Carpinteria. Thank you. Very interesting discussions up to this point here. And I would like to start with the basically where it's left off with alternate sites. I farm this area. I've been here all my life, and first I'd like to point out that the AT&T has a telephone pole on the other side of the street, right where Bates Road comes down. There's in the photograph you can see a grouping of trees on the edge. There's a telephone pole there where I believe it is an AT&T repeater is there. And as a longtime resident there and farmer.
Is that the area?
Yes. I've tried various different wireless phones. And when I had AT&T, I'm currently with Verizon, but when I had AT&T, there was very good coverage in that area. But up further on the ranch, I had poor coverage. So I opted for Verizon because I spend more time higher elevation than down there. But it's interesting where their telephone pole is looking right down the gun barrel of the freeway, both north and south, that might take into consideration the shadow that Dwayne was talking about. It seems to work for them. And so that's existing. So I would appreciate more consideration and question of alternative sites. I'm the guy that planted the palm trees up there around the site. They're about 20 years old, and it's interesting. They're measured heights right now, but they do put on a foot or two of growth per year. So my concern that I wrote in questioning was, and it was answered, that the palm trees will not be taken out because of blocking of the communication. But they continue to grow, and a tower that's put in at 45 feet is as far as I know, doesn't grow. So what's going to be happening here 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, but just 5 years from now?
I can't resist. It might grow.
Well,
you were listening to that.
I heard that. And, whatever. My original intent was to put in the palm trees for soil stabilization along that bank because it's rather soft. And palms have tremendous root systems. That worked great. The unintended effect of it was that it brought in a great number of migratory birds that nest in the palm trees. And it was like a great surprise to me, the Baltimore Orioles and the linnets and the owls. We don't do towers for the owls on the ranch or the owl boxes. We have palm trees, and they love them. So that was an unintended result of the palm trees. I'd like to see them stay. The other thing that I would like to bring out is road maintenance. That's my driveway. That's my son's driveway. We have who's going to pitch in for the wear and tear on my roadway? The 10-acre site is a site that I created through a lot split. I don't know what year it was, maybe back in 2002 or something, but I created the 10-acre site and granted an easement to it. So there is an easement to that property, no question. It's just who's going to be helping with the road maintenance. That's the other question that I had. So if you could sort of keep those things in mind, I would appreciate it. And did you have any thoughts? That would be it. I'd be curious if anybody else, have you ever, sir, you spoke well about your travels back and forth from Santa Barbara County every day. Have you ever tried AT&T?
Hold on just a second. Even though this seems like an informal process, we don't have dialogue like that. So I'll have your question directed in a minute. Are there any other questions of the speaker? I have one. Did you talk to the planner at all? I did read your letter. I saw that and saw your concerns. But did you have telephone conversations or email conversations with the planner regarding this question of road maintenance?
No. That's a brand new question.
Okay.
It was not asked. It just is one of the things come up. And
It bubbled up.
Yeah.
And then also, you mentioned owls and orioles. What are linnets?
The linnets are the little. The males have a red head in the springtime, and they jump around. They're very common, but the orioles will build many false nests. Maybe they're just compulsive builders, but the other birds come along, other species come along and take advantage of that empty nest and hop in it. And, it's empty housing, so they take advantage of it.
Squatters. Airbnb.
Yeah. Oh. They just don't pay rent. That's all. They do. They catch the little bugs and insects that worms.
So, what's your interest in the actual
10 acres
site? Yeah. What is your relationship to the actual? Are you the owner? Are you a property owner, or are you a leaser? I don't know what your relationship is.
Used to be.
Okay.
A divorce has my ex with that property right now, and our son is here, and he manages it. I'm further up on the ranch, so that is my main driveway right there. I'm going by it daily, and when I'm up top, I look down on it. I'm neutral on this. I'm just asking the question of why not consider the other side of the road where another facility is working.
Okay.
Existing and working, as far as I know. I don't know all the technical that Dwayne knows, but I know AT&T sure works there. Oh, and what's really curious to me is right there on Bates Road, if you want your Verizon phone to work, you go underneath the overpass, the thick concrete overpass, and you'll get your call. Just sit there and talk away. And
really?
Somehow, in the shadow of the cliff and the shadow of the bridge, it comes through. So, keep that in mind.
Fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, any questions? Sorry.
Sir, there's a civil code section, if you don't have a road maintenance agreement, 845, that says anybody who uses that easement can be compelled to pay their pro rata share. So you might want to look at it. 845, civil code.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. That's all the speaker cards that I have right now. So are there some closing comments? Welcome back.
Thank you. Tricia Knight with Verizon Wireless. I want to just touch on a few of those questions. First is the road, which is a valid concern. Once we're constructed at approximately a 2 to 3 week time frame, it's an unmanned facility, so maintenance happens realistically maybe once every 6 months, but it's basically unmanned. But as part of our lease agreement with the property owner, there is a road maintenance contract. If, for example, during that 3 week construction period, there's potholes created, maybe from heavy equipment or any damage to that road, we are obligated to repair it. And then we also have to go through fire department standards to make sure that there's road base, that there's passable conditions for fire trucks. So between those two vehicles. I think that helps with the road concern. I'm not sure if there's a specific condition for it, but those are the two mechanisms for which that can be handled. And then with respect to the AT&T facility on the other side of the road, that's where we started. We have a master license agreement with the utility poles. And so we originally looked at that. I don't know if you're familiar with that facility, but it's basically two small antennas hanging off the edge of the pole at probably 18 to 20 feet. And for AT&T, it does cover on that curve. Now, once that pole's utilized, it's not really co-locatable, and the reason is because you have to have vertical separation between the carriers of between 8 to 10 feet. And so you can't go lower because then you're down into the work zone of the pole itself. And once you go 10 feet higher, that's not really something we believe planning staff, and I think we did look at that, would be able to support. And then also the other existing poles, once you get that further down, that curve is just right there, like he was indicating, there's a straight shot. Once you even go 2 poles the other direction, the shadowing occurs again. So AT&T got a really great pole, and it solves their problem, but there's really not another pole that would solve the same problem for Verizon. What we did try to do as an alternative is to cover from the Carpinteria side. So we looked at, there's that, I forget the name of it, but it's where Salvation Army's on one side and then there's a commercial area on the other. Did that for many, many years and couldn't work out a lease agreement. And so just sort of going down the path of ending up where we are. So I think that answered some of his questions, but I'm also available to answer any others that you might have.
So you mentioned AT&T. What are the other carriers?
The other carriers right now in the market, so it's Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, and T-Mobile. There was another small little one named Metro PCS, but T-Mobile acquired them about 1.5 to 2 years ago. And so those are the 4 carriers. And everyone sort of has the same issue on this curve that I know of, but I've never had anyone other else than Verizon. Back when it was GTE MobileNet when I was 18. So.
Driving here, I've passed by 2 areas in Camarillo where there's a proliferation of equipment because, there's a willing landlord. What kind of agreement do you have with the landlord here to make it so that it's your sweet spot?
So it is always an option. And we are supposed to make all our facilities in the county co-locatable. So let's say AT&T did decide, hey, that's nice. Could we go ahead and locate in that same tree? Well, if you can envision, the antennas are inside the trunk, so they're stacked. Once you get that 10 feet of separation, the antennas would have to be on the ground, and that's not an option. So this really isn't a co-locatable structure. If AT&T decided to design a different facility, the county has the discretion to say that this is a type of facility that they don't want a proliferation like that. So it goes through the review process, and the county can decide if they would like it, if it's appropriate to have an additional facility, most likely another tree of a shorter height or something.
I'm sorry.
Along those lines.
Could you repeat that a little slower, please?
Sure.
That the county could decide not to allow co-location?
You can't, and you'd once again have to show the need, and AT&T's across the highway. You have to show that it's the least intrusive, and you have to show that the county is not prohibiting service. So if AT&T, Sprint, or anyone was to come, they have to go through the same proving of the need for the site. And it's been a lot of information that we've shared back and forth over the course of a long period of time to show that need to staff to make sure that we've illustrated the need. And so they would have to do the same thing. And if the need is not shown, the law specifically states that the county can say that this is not a good spot for another carrier. But they'd have to go through the same process we did.
Go ahead.
Just for clarification, are you stating that if another carrier, Sprint, T-Mobile, wanted an antenna in that same location, they would have to put in another tower because of the limitations of this 8 to 10 foot requirement?
That is correct. They would not most likely co-locate on this tower due to the separation requirements and the height that we're tapped out here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Closing comments by staff? So do we have the issue of the road maintenance, is that conditioned in this approval?
Madam Chair, I would have to defer to Councilor Onstadt regarding that. The issue of road maintenance for cell sites came up in San Diego County when I was there, and I was received an education. Road maintenance on a private easement road is a private civil matter, not subject to our intrusion. And so in the case in San Diego, the complaints were that the easement was being overburdened by a cell site going in, and then the adjacent people who also shared the easement would claim that it was being overburdened by this industrial use. Again, that was a private civil matter that the county can't legislate maintenance agreements on private roads.
Gotcha. Also, there was a question directed to you, and I think rather than answering it personally, if you can just talk about what the county's role is in not discriminating between different carriers.
Madam Chair, the county is limited in its authority by federal law, and among the various limitations that are provided to us, we can't discriminate among carriers. So in many places, such as Peters Point, you see 4 different, and your commission's familiar with 4 different palm trees with 4 different operators. And that's because they each have the right to compete in the same market and serve the same customers, and we can't discriminate against them. So in the case of this particular site, it's conceivable in the future that someone may say, we want to fill that same gap in the same manner. We may or may not have the ability to say no, depending on the analysis of the project. That's not before you today, and we really can't deny competition.
Okay. Could you follow up on the question of alternative sites and what they've presented to you, or?
Madam Chair, what they presented to us is sort of the standard information package that we require in order to establish that there's a need for the facility, and the need only relates to their network, not to the network of any other operator. So I guess I'll go ahead and disclose that I'm a Verizon user, and I can attest every morning and every evening that there's a need at the county line.
Hang up the phone and drive. Are there any other questions? Okay, so I'll close the public hearing and.
Commissioner Dukas.
Yeah. Okay. If it's the commission's pleasure, we've got a speaker who wants a second try. Is that okay? Come on up.
Well,
state your name again.
Yeah. I just
Please state your name again.
Anthony Brown, Carpinteria. Just wondering if I could have clarification of the explanation you gave on the AT&T telephone pole on the other side. Is if there were a taller pole, there would be space for you to put 2 antennas there?
It would be about 15 feet difference in
Okay.
the top of the pole, which usually isn't in the coastal area.
This isn't gonna work because we're recorded,
Okay.
and so if you want to ask afterwards, or if you want to give your answer after he's finished, then we can complete that.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with your procedure.
That's okay. We're filmed. You're on camera. You can look at this,
Okay.
at home on your computer on the county's website.
Very good. If they're in the business of saving money for Verizon, why not stick in a taller pole and put their 2 antennas on it and be done? Thank you.
Thank you.
So in answer to that question, right now, Verizon is in the process of locating on utility poles, and that's one of the things that the jurisdictions really frown upon. A 15-foot taller utility pole, it's pretty large. And so if you've got one pole sticking out in a line of utility poles, that's what we would need to do. And we originally, 5 years ago, looked at that met with staff, that was not something that was going to be supportable from a permitting standpoint. So hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you very much. And again, go back to staff. You want to weigh in?
We'll leave it there.
Okay. And I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a comment first. It seems over the years, as I review these matters, when a use seems to be in conflict with agricultural zoning, staff takes a position that if it's grazing land, it seemingly is not agriculture, and I take great exception to that. I understand and appreciate why we're doing what we're doing here today, but I don't know if you made the case or not. I understand it's a de minimis use of land, but I wish staff would be more conscious of the fact that grazing land is ag land, and this land is capable of further development if somebody wanted to. Thank you.
I agree. The concern I have is about growth of the site. I understand it's not before us, but it is foreseeable. That's something that I think is just a problem with our system. I can't make the motion.
I move staff recommendation.
I'll move to second.
Okay. Any discussion? Thank you very much. Next item. Report by the Planning Director on board actions and other matters.
Thank you, Chair Dukas and members of the Planning Commission. I'll go over your schedule really quickly, and then I'll go over the recent activities of the board. So we have 2 hearings right now scheduled. We have a July 28th hearing, which is an appeal of a planning director approved modification of a conditional use permit for the reactivation of 3 existing oil and gas wells on an existing oil and gas production lease. That is also located on Königstein Road and operated by Murata Petroleum Company. So as we're talking about Königstein Road and Murata Petroleum Company, the board heard the appeal that your board supported the planning department's recommendation to deny the appeal on the Murata Agnew, which is about 2 miles down on the same road, Königstein Road. That case was for 3 new oil wells and 3 existing oil wells, and I think, as you recall, all 6 of those oil wells were approved during the original EIR process. The board upheld your decision also on a 3-2 vote, and so now you will hear the new appeal on July 28th on the same road for an existing oil operation.
Same grounds?
Same grounds. You also have an item on your schedule for October 13th. That's a very important item for us. It's a Phase 2B of the Local Coastal Plan updates, where we're going to be talking about wireless facilities in the coastal zone. So we're placing a new wireless ordinance in the coastal zone, as well as the California Coastal Trail. Those 2 items will be before you on October 13th, and then to the board on December the 6th. The Board of Supervisors also heard last Tuesday the Local Coastal Plan Update Phase 2A, which your commission unanimously approved, where we talked about parking, landscaping, signage, tree protection, and paleo and filming. So those all went through without any changes. Your commission made some minor changes. The board made no changes after that. And so those will be going to the Coastal Commission. I sent a letter yesterday to the interim director of the Coastal Commission asking that he hear that item, that the Coastal Commission hear that item in December, because the December hearing will be in the Ventura City Chambers. So hopefully they will accommodate us. So, because it's an important thing, our local coastal plan is very important for the cities. The way that the Coastal Commission works is they travel up and down the state every month, so your hearing could be in Eureka, right? And so we're asking that they try to accommodate our LCP hearing here in Ventura. I also want to just really say that these two hearings were very difficult, both of them years in the making. The Murata case had 5 hearings altogether. It was a very lengthy hearing for oil wells that were already approved and fully, entitled at one point. And we did an environmental impact report. There was a lot of challenges to that applicant. The board did actually make a change that I think came from Commissioner Rodriguez, where there was some discussion at your planning commission that said that the board said that they were not to operate on Saturdays. So they did make that accommodation. The signage issue did come up that Commissioner Cali raised. And so we are still working on that issue with Caltrans about what it takes to get signage on 150 in Königstein. And Supervisor Long made that motion again, that she thought that was very important, and the board agreed. So we will be pursuing that signage option for both speed limit signage and signage for oncoming trucks, whatever the appropriate language would be. We're pursuing that for Königstein Road. But both projects were lengthy, both were difficult. I really want to give Brian Baca here some props for that. I mean, those are difficult cases, oil and gas cases, appeal cases, where you need to be on top of every issue, pipeline issues, the road issues. Christina did a really good job in researching all the history for that. And so, it was a really contentious project, and I thought that they did an excellent job. And also for Rosemary Rowan, who is heading up our long-range planning department, and Jennifer Welsh, who did just a yeoman's job on that LCP amendment. Those are very difficult. And so, there'll be more difficult days ahead. Probably not so much maybe with the coastal trail and wireless, but we will be back early next year with environmentally sensitive habitat, really outlining what you can and can't do in the Santa Monica Mountains. And that's going to be a real challenge for the staff and the community and the Coastal Commission. It will be one of the most difficult ordinances that we work on. As far as an update, so we do keep a nice list of updates for the things that you ask us to work on, and the signage is one, so we are continuing to work on that. And I know that Commissioner Onstott had raised the issue that he would like a status update involving the litigation for Moore Park and Broad Beach, and I think our County Counsel, Mr. Barnes, is ready to give that update.
Thank you, Director Prilhart. And I just want to compliment staff on your clear explanation of what could be confusing federal and state and local rules on the wireless. And I want to commend your commission for understanding those rules. It's a patchwork, and there's always new laws being thrown at us. So I commend everyone for grasping those issues, and for me not having to say anything, which is always nice. In terms of the lawsuit regarding the Broad Beach project, so as you probably know, the county and Fillmore sued the Broad Beach Geologic Hazard Abatement District and the city of Moore Park over an agreement whereby the Geologic Hazard Abatement District agreed to basically send all of the trucks that would be trucking sand from the Grimes Canyon area through the city of Fillmore and the unincorporated county. And so they would basically go on Highway 23 over to 126, get off at Wells Road, go right by Satacoy, and then through the El Rio Island Acres area down the coast. When it looks like the most direct and logical route would be for those trucks to head south through Moore Park. And so, the county and the city of Fillmore were not consulted before that agreement was put in place. And so the county and Fillmore's position is that the agreement's illegal because the city of Moore Park, neither the city of Moore Park nor the Geologic Hazard Abatement District has a legal authority to regulate regional traffic, and there's there's a Caltrans process in place. If a city wants to ban truck traffic on its roads, there's a specific process that they have to follow, and that obviously wasn't followed here. And so the county sued on that basis that those entities lack the legal authority to enter into that kind of contract. And then, so that's the main claim. Then the second claim is CEQA, and the CEQA claim says that this truck routing agreement, I'll call it, is a separate project under CEQA, and there was no environmental analysis conducted, and the CEQA process wasn't followed, so that's another reason why the agreement should be null and void. And so the lawsuit was filed a few months ago, and we're in the process of finalizing the administrative record of proceedings. And so it's called the writ of mandate case. And so the way it works is that the parties all put all the relevant documents into an administrative record. And so the trial is basically a hearing where there's not witnesses, where a judge looks at all those documents and then decides, who has a better legal argument, basically. And so we're still at the beginning phase of putting the record together. Hopefully we're almost done with that. And then once that happens, the parties will file legal briefs on the legal issues, and then we'll have a hearing. The hearing date hasn't been set. The case, because there were two or more than two public entities on opposite ends of each other who are both in Ventura County, there's a legal rule that says any of those public entities can have the case transferred out of the county. And so Moorpark requested that the case be moved out of the county. And so our court sent the case up to Santa Barbara County. And so it's being heard in Santa Barbara County. There's a status conference, I believe, on July 18th. And so at that point, hopefully we'll be in a position to establish a briefing schedule and get a hearing date and keep moving the case along. In terms of the Broad Beach project, they still need permits and approvals to proceed with their overall project. And so the next big hearing on that is before the State Lands Commission on August 9th. And so that will be in Long Beach. And so Broad Beach needs a lease from the State Lands Commission because they, their project involves fortifying an existing rock wall revetment that protects the houses along there, in addition to depositing a lot of sand to basically reestablish the beach. And so their revetment and I believe other work is on public land. And so that's why they need the lease from the State Lands Commission. And so that's our next big hurdle. And so that's basically it. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about the case or anything else.
You asked for it. So.
Oh, no, I was just, settlement negotiations ongoing?
Settlement negotiations are ongoing. It's confidential, and I have nothing to report on that publicly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there more from the planning director?
No, that's all I had, but I did want to not miss an opportunity to say props to our county council. Both Jeff Barnes and ultimately Leroy Smith are, very much involved in everything before it comes to your commission and before it comes to the board. So the vast amount of, thousands of permits that we process, we're rarely challenged legally because the work that is done is so good. So this issue is, outside of the planning department or any permit that we've issued. But it's nice for us, and it's nice for your commission, and it's nice for our board to have such outstanding CEQA attorneys right here in the building, because they really do keep us out of court. So thanks to Jeff.
Excellent. So item 7B.
He didn't hear that.
Items the Planning Commission may wish to introduce. I'll go ahead. Commissioner Rodriguez and I attended the outreach meeting in, was that Oxnard?
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and say?
Well, it was a one of the two meetings that planning and behavioral health held public outreach. There was one, I think, the day before in Thousand Oaks, maybe. I think it occurred about the 23rd or 4th of May, and we attended. Nora and I attended a similar meeting in Oxnard at Behavioral Health to get input from the public on the issue of medical marijuana and how it ought to proceed as far as county. More than anything else, I was certainly an observer and heard the comments and the concerns of several people that were there. There were probably about, 30 people there maybe. Maybe a dozen speakers, a little bit more than that possibly.
Piggybacking on that, I attended both of them. I attended the one in Thousand Oaks as well that was a little better attended, I would say about 60 people. There was also a presentation by two ladies who have formed an alliance to provide cannabis for their customers. But there were a lot of silent observers that I thought were affected, wanted to know what was going on, but for whatever reason didn't participate. So it was valuable having the Chris Stevens make his presentation and behavioral health make her presentation about what is existing right now. And I learned some things. I thought that it was it came back to the central point that we heard before when we first got started with this, and that is that there are people who desperately desire this as medication, and the county is just trying to come up with some reasonable regulations to protect other interests, because not everybody is for this. So that was something that was worthwhile that came out of it, was acknowledgement that it's a complicated issue. But anyway, I really appreciated that the county did that, and considering that some things that the public is invited, I thought it was well attended and worthwhile. So any further things the commission wishes to introduce? Seeing none, I'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you.